Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Monday, August 18th. Astute observers watching on the YouTube side of things will see that I am in Brooklyn, not the bunker, but Gallery 55 here upstairs in Brooklyn. Some unscheduled travel woes have led me to the dog days of summer in the city, not where I want to be. I want to be in Saratoga, but we'll be back there soon enough for Travers Week. Travers already drawn. We have a minute at the end of the show. Maybe we'll do a first look with our guest, who you know from the great work he does with Nick's Notebook over on the In the Money Plus side, inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. You also know him from the free writing he does over there, sponsored by our friends who stand Bucaro. I'm talking about Nick Tammaro. Nick, how are things?
Going great, Pete. Can't complain. Ready for the biggest week of the Saratoga meet, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's exciting. The card is drawn. It's the old thing where, you're going to see some people grumbling about field sizes, but these are good races that I'm really excited about. We'll touch on those a little bit later in the show, but before we look forward, I want to look back, and let's start with the feature from Saratoga on Saturday, the Grade 1 Alabama Stakes. What do we learn here, my friend?
Well, we learned that Nitrogen's versatility is as advertised. I think she validated the off-the-turf performance from the Wonder Again quite clearly, proved that 1.25 miles is within her scope. That was another concern that I had about her in particular. And I think above all proved that Good Cheer is what we thought she was, right? She's just a horse that didn't really take a big step forward, and she's continued to run the same race over and over. And in the face of a horse that she couldn't quite wear down, she couldn't do it. So it was a very solid performance as far as historic Alabamas go. It wasn't one, but it was obviously very nice to see a talented horse be able to carry her business onto a different surface, because she had never been on a fast dirt track before, obviously. So I would say that we got from it that Nitrogen is versatile enough to now probably be a dirt filly, and I would imagine their next spot would probably be more like the Spinster than the QE2, which obviously if she's running in the Breeders' Cup, she's running in the Distaff. And I think that has a lot to do with the distance and configuration at Del Mar. And, it was very solid. I mean, I don't want to go into I'm not in the business of these outrageous platitudes. I'm not going to talk about how she's great or mighty or all these various things. She's very solid. She's an above average 3-year-old filly and got the job done in nice fashion.
Speed figures are good at sort of giving us a line on where these horses are, right? 93 from Nitrogen does say, okay, this is a career best on the dirt, validating your point about maybe just being better, and this will be the surface going forward for a while anyway. But it's also not something that puts her in the upper echelon of some of these super fillies we've talked about. When you see, I mean, granted, with Torpedo Anna, figure-wise, the Travers last year does live a little bit in isolation, but it's not a triple-digit, oh my goodness, did you see what she just did? It was better than workmanlike and somewhere short of awesome. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, I think there's an argument to be made that I'd like to see what that stretch run looks like with her running a straight path and Good Cheer being able to rally to her outside. I don't think the result would have been different, but I think she's basically that. She's a very, very solid horse who now clearly proved that she doesn't have to take her surface with her, and there's something to be said for it.
Good Cheer is one that is looking, in terms of a figure pattern, like one that lives up to something that I say a lot and we talk about a lot. And I think JK's picked up on it and others as well. I originally heard this talking about English race horses. I think the concept of a horse, whether or not they train on, typically a horse is going to improve, 6 to 8 points from a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old, maybe a bit more than that. Good Cheer is running slightly faster than she was in terms of the clock last year. Take out the debacle last time, that doesn't count. But yeah, the explosive move forward that I think many were expecting. I don't know. I mean, if you really wanted to be the head cheerleader of Good Cheer, you could say maybe the distance factored in. Maybe she could have another big race with a better figure going a little bit shorter. But it's hard to get overly excited. The promise that that was shown for Good Cheer with that massive win streak at the beginning of the career, I'm not sure that filly, who looked so much better than the competition, is walking through that door again. Sounds like you agree.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I agree with all of that. And the concern and the reason why some of us that are looked at as broken record sort of harp on when horses don't take big steps forward in their speed figures is that they're just not really getting much better. And I think that was the case with her. So as she was winning these 3-year-old filly races in pretty authoritative fashion, but running the same figure, it was just a bit disconcerting. Now, the contrarian in me, which exists and thrives, in fact, would say, okay, well, Torpedo Anna got a 95 in the Coaching Club American Oaks last year, and then rattled off a 111 in the Travers and a 93 in the Cotillion. Dorth Vader won a grade 1 earlier this year with a 94. Like, why are you guys condemning Good Cheer for having a 91 as a slightly mid to late season 3-year-old filly? The one thing I will say also about this week's Personal Ensign that would make Good Cheer fans feel better is it feels like the older female ranks are loaded with speed horses. So,
Right.
is it possible that Brad, whose barn right now is not really rolling, could take Good Cheer, reinvent her a little bit over the next couple of months as that, and you wouldn't even really need a reinvention. It would just be her reasserting herself as that steady grinding type that's going to get some pace in front of her, and all of a sudden she ends up running very well in a race like the Breeders' Cup Distaff. It is far from unheard of. It is, to me, it's something that's far from unbelievable. I think it has very, very strong possibilities. And I think the concern, the worry is that she was supposed to be better at a 1.25 miles. This was supposed to be the race where she really took a big step forward, asserted herself. She was built like it. She ran like it. She's not really built like it, but she ran like a horse that was really going to excel at a 1.25 miles. And she just kind of came up wanting in a final quarter that was, I don't want to call it an eyesore, but it can get a little rough in the Alabama, and it did. So I think that's the worry at this point, Pete, and that's what we're going to need to see a little bit better of from her in her wherever her next start ends up being.
Yeah, my eyes contradict the narrative that I'd heard about how she was going to be better at a 1.25 miles. She looked to me to be gasping for air and like one who'd be a lot better going 9. I imagine that'll be the next assignment. We'll see. I'm not giving up on her forever or anything, but it's we'll just take it on a case by case basis and go from there.
I will say one thing and I did mention Brad Cox before we finished the Good Cheer conversation. Brad Cox over the last 60 days in graded stakes on dirt is 0 for 13. And there's not a lot of times where we see this happen. What this proves, of course, is that Brad is a trainer, and that means there's going to be some losing streaks, and they're going to happen. And there's not really much you can do it. I mean, included in these losing streaks are defeats at 1 to 10, 3 to 5, and 1 to 5. So the longest price among these horses was Highland Falls at 13 to 1, and he ran the best race of all of them, getting a 107 buyer in the Whitney. So, Brad's got a lot of horses running this weekend. I'm sure he'll break out of the doldrums very quickly, but there is a part of me that wants to say like, she kind of got right. And I'm a Good Cheer fan, which you can probably tell. She kind of got right during a time where his barn wasn't that good. What happens at Keeneland when Brad goes to 35% and then takes her out west where he's won many times before? So it's going to hardly shock me. It's not like she's that far off. I just expected more. And the problem race to race with these horses is that you can't let your level of expectation outweigh their performance in terms of analysis, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. When it comes to those short-term fluctuations of form that we see from trainers, jockeys, I think, is a little bit different because there's such a physical element involved. What do you mostly put it down to? I mean, obviously, there's extreme examples we've seen where there'll be a bug going through a barn and everybody just runs underperformed. There's other times when it seems like horses are all cycling up at the same time for whatever reason. And then there's just randomness that can cause some of these streaks. In terms of this little minor blip that you're describing with the Cox barn, do you think it's a genuine cold streak, or is it more like the absence of a hot streak, or could it just be randomness?
I think part of it is that I think Brad would be the first to tell you his barn does not have the firepower it did in years past, which is cyclical. There's going to be years where Brad shows up in Saratoga absolutely loaded, and there are going to be years where he's a little thin in those ranks. And right now he doesn't have a marquee handicap horse. He doesn't have a marquee older distaff horse, which is something that he's kind of had every year, most years for the last 7 or so, going back to Monomoy Girl. I mean, you think about it, he either had Monomoy Girl or Idiomatic in his barn for most of 18 to 23.
Amazing,
and
right?
2024, in fact, because she was a favorite in the Personal Ensign last year. So he's just lacking that bit of star power. And yeah, I mean, to put an exact number on it, since Patch Adams won the Woody Stevens, he's won for his last 19 in graded stakes. His only win during that period was Bishop's Bay at 1-5 at Monmouth in the Salvatore Mile on June 14th. Brad Cox has not won, as we sit here, he has not won a graded stakes race since June 14th.
That's very surprising.
Not grade ones.
Yeah.
A graded stakes race.
Yeah, that's a big surprise and something we're expecting to change very soon with the old idea that form is fickle and class is permanent. I'd look for him to get hot any minute now, but I probably also wouldn't want to be lumping in on a short price on the next one that comes down the pike.
Agreed. Exactly. Yep.
Let's talk about another race from Saratoga on Saturday with potential Breeders' Cup implications. Talked about this race on the Baby Talk show. Was expecting a big performance. Wasn't necessarily expecting that big performance. He was one of the ones on the radar for sure, but he was not the most hyped of the bunch, as you can tell from the 5-1 price point on It's Our Time. Nick, I thought I was watching a replay of Uncle Mo's maiden win on the Travers card from all those years ago. You want to talk about visually impressive. You want to talk about a horse in a race of his own. This was just awesome. And if you haven't seen it yet, find it on YouTube immediately. We'll wait. You can pause us. We'll wait while you go watch what In Our Time does here. One of the things I love the most about having you on the show is it's somebody that I have no problem, no bones about asking you to interrogate a speed figure on the spot. The speed figure came back in 94. Ordinarily, you'd say, oh my gosh, that's awesome. In this case, based on the eye, actually sounds quite low to me, given how awesome it was. What did you think about It's Our Time? What did you think about the speed figure specifically? What happens next?
Yeah, great questions. I mean, look, I think to start with the speed figure itself, I start with the race itself. One of the fun things about watching these races on Saratoga Live is that you get that far turn angle where you really see how hard the jockeys are riding. And if you're a decent race watcher, you can kind of determine who's going well. And as they switched from that angle to the traditional pan, I thought to myself, he just ran by Hero Declared like he was standing still. Is that right? And all of a sudden they straightened out and it was like, wow, he's like 3 or 4 in front. So it was a pretty devastating move and a pretty awesome, kick in, turn of foot, however you want to refer to it, from It's Our Time. I think the figure, the difference in this figure and some of the historically high speed figures we've seen from flashy 2-year-old debuting runners is this race was 6.5. Okay. If you stop this race at 6 furlongs, the figure is 100 or more.
Okay.
That's the problem, was that extra 16th actually taxed him a little bit because he went about 6 and 4. And that is slow relative to the rest of it. So that's the problem, is that if he stops the clock in 109 and 4, that raw figure is about 6 to 7 points higher than it was as it ended up. And then he gets the 100 or 101, he wins by 12. And everybody says, oh my God, this is the next great thing, which they should still be saying because he looks like a horse who has incredible potential. So that's where I think you land with the figure. The only thing about the way the day shook out with regards to figures that's a little surprising is that there was one track speed at Saratoga on Saturday, which has not really been the case. Usually the Wilson Chute races are run with a slightly different variant, or they're at least assessed with a slightly different variant. This day on paper looks very straightforward. The only thing you could argue is, do you think Tennessee Belle improved from her debut to her second start? I'm inclined to say that she did. Yeah. The problem with the figure that she was assigned is that she didn't. So could you say, I think Tennessee Belle ran an 82? Well, if so, then It's Our Time ran a 99.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the thing, is that this is going to require a lot of analysis of the run backs. The other thing that I would say will be interesting to see is, I don't know if it was because he just walloped them or what, but none of the horses behind him ran. I mean, they didn't run at all. Whit Beckman was touting a horse that ended up getting a 57 buyer.
Right.
So, I mean, is it just the new nature of their existence, and they saw him run by and were like, holy cow, I mean, we can't play with that guy, we'll just pack it in. So it's one of those, if it was an 8-length win and somebody ran a fig in the low to mid 70s, that would probably be a little bit more believable, but like the entire balance of the field didn't run at all. So that's kind of the way I would assess it. It's a three-pronged approach. Let's see what those horses run back with. Let's see what Tennessee Belle runs back with. And remember also that it's 6.5 for a debuting 2-year-old. That's a lot of distance right now.
Yep.
Right. I mean, we just ran graded stakes at 6.5 for the first time. We won't run 7 for a couple of weeks now in the Hopeful and the Spinaway. So one thing to keep in mind.
How serious of a Breeders' Cup juvenile contender do you think In Our Time is off that?
His second dam was a route horse. His second dam was by Empire Maker, was a 2-turn horse, actually won a couple of races on the inner track, broke her maiden at Saratoga at 1 1/8 miles. The first dam, Shady Summer, he's her first foal. She was effective up to 7 furlongs. She lost her only start at 1 mile. He looks a little sprinty to me. But I think where Tom Amoss runs him next will be interesting because he's probably in no man's land as far as running twice more before the Breeders' Cup. Correct. He probably really can only run once. My inclination would be that he runs him in the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland.
Me too.
I think the Iroquois comes back probably a little bit too soon, but the Iroquois does buy him a couple of weeks, or buys him 2 weeks off of the Hopeful. So he goes to the Iroquois, he'll have 4 weeks. Then he would have about, I think it's 6 or 7 to the Breeders' Cup. I just don't think he can run him in the Iroquois and the Breeders' Futurity. No, or he decides to go the slightly more, I don't know if I want to call it conservative route, and he goes to the Champagne around 1 turn. So I think the Champagne would probably mask his distance limitations better than the Breeders' Futurity will. In all likelihood, the Breeders' Futurity will have a much larger field. And so I think that'll be a little telling from a guy like Tom, who's pretty transparent in terms of what he thinks. If he thinks he might be a little distance limited, I think I'd see him in the Champagne.
Fascinating. Great analysis there. We're going to talk about the racing that happened up at Woodbine in a minute, but I do want to thank some of our partners. Monmouth Park, we'll start with them. They've got their big Saratoga Monmouth Travers Day contest coming up. You can go to monmouthpark.com website, navigate over to the handicapping contest area, and see how you can get involved in that one. I believe that's an $800 buy-in. If you have questions about Monmouth and their contest, you can also just hit me up. I'll put you in touch directly with Brian Skirka. Go to inthemoneypodcast.com and hit the contact button. Those go straight to me. Twinspires.com, our friends over there, they've got contests this week feeding into the big Millions betting challenge coming up. You can go to twinspires.com, navigate over to their contest tab. We're going to have a special show covering Saratoga on Friday. I think I'm going to drag in Matt Vagvolgi for that one. We'll be talking about those races. JK gave you a couple winners for last Friday's big feeder over there. So that's another opportunity. Also want to thank a new partner. You're going to be hearing a lot more from them. This is reinvented from what we heard about last year, but morningline.io. You've heard from these guys before on this network, but not in this way. This is a really interesting new way to play the horses, basically a marketplace where you can buy and sell horses. Really fun. We're going to have an interview with Joel Funk coming up probably in the early weeks from next week by the time we get it done, but maybe before that. But be on the look and definitely check out the website, morningline.io. Some really cool stuff going on over there. Speaking of important partners, Woodbine. I had the pleasure of being up there for the King's Plate weekend, and it was just terrific. I don't know if you got to see, apparently this has been making the rounds, my attempt at being a sailor. Have you seen this, Nick? Hoisting a sail. Have you seen this?
I have. I think if I was disabled and adrift on a boat, I'd look for other options.
So that you see the actual deckhand and CJ Johnson doing it correctly, and meanwhile I'm there just looking like no.
Pretty strong effort from CJ's from a pretty landlocked part of Texas, so that's must have been a lot of days on Lake Grapevine for him.
I was impressed. I mean, he's jumping up there. He's got the monkey arms going. He's looking good. I'm just can't hold a patch to Popeye the Sailor Man, let's say that. But the sail was fun, getting to hang with Lindsey Bax and the Woodbine team, Klaus Ebner, who's a regular on these airwaves as well. It's great to see everybody. Really fun day of racing. We'll start off by talking about the King's Plate. And this was one where I was just frustrated after the race. It's not like, look, the King's Plate is always fun because there's so many different ways you can go. But this was a clear one where if rather than putting everything into pick bets and then sort of riding or dying, as was the case with those, had I just looked at, come up with an idea of what price every horse should be. I'm very confident in saying Mancetti, the winner, was an overlay at 18-1. I mean, this horse looked like at least a peripheral contender. Like so many of them, I was questioning about whether this horse wanted to go the 1.25 miles. But he got the right kind of trip. This was a terrific ride by Pietro Moran, and he just put the sword to this field. Really great ride and an exciting result at a great price. If you, like our friend Ben Kudla from the Inside Track podcast, Racelens power user, were smart enough to tout this one, you got to feel smart for at least a little while.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's kind of funny to me that as infrequently as horses on the front end run well in the Kentucky Derby, they seem to do a lot better in the King's Plate. And for all the conversation about it being hard to wire races on synthetics, but this was a good ride. And as you said, he took the sword to him. I mean, he didn't back this pace down at all. He got after it pretty quickly. So, one of those where we seem to talk every week about the not how fast you're going, but how you're going fast. And when you're going fast and everybody's close to you, they're in a lot more trouble than you are. And, I think it was one of those where we all advocate for going faster because if they don't want to go with you, then that means that's that much more of a deficit they have. And if they do want to go with you, they're really screwed.
I want to ask you this. What's the difference between chasing and stalking?
I think stalking is when you're comfortable and within yourself close to the pace, whereas chasing is where you're being taken a little bit more off the bridle, having to go faster than you like. So I would argue that stalking to me is exactly what Sovereignty did in the Jim Dandy. It was a relatively slow pace. He was right on top of it. He was stalking. Chasing is more of like, I think about, his Alabamas that I thought were really fun historically. And I think the one that comes to mind was Irad rode a horse named Questing years ago that went super fast on the front end, and she put everybody on the chase, right? She made everybody chase. And so it's a matter of, even if you're in a foot race with somebody else and they're running in front of you and you're within yourself, you're just waiting to accelerate to run by them, you're stalking. Whereas if they're running fast and you're running fast to keep up with them, you're chasing.
Love that. Maybe the jockey's hands are the best way to determine.
I think that's part of it.
Which is
yeah, depending on the rider. I mean, some riders, like Santana's obviously had an excellent meet. Santana and Irad, you're going to see their legs move before their hands move because they use their lower body so much. And so if you see Irad's knees start moving and you don't really see his hands going at the same pace, he's trying to find out if he's got anything under him. And he's one of those that's very rare in that sense. Or you get a guy like Saez who's all upper body. He's going to start just pumping away to see that. And if he's doing that early, they're not stalking, they're chasing.
Want to remind folks that we've got the In the Money. Excuse me. Let me take that again because we're going to do this for the cutout. And then, of course, I get the frog in my throat at the wrong time. We'll leave it in for the main broadcast. But let me mess around here and see if I get my voice back. Before we get to the Taylor, were there any other performances at Woodbine this weekend that particularly impressed you, or at Saratoga? Just a chance to talk about whatever you want to for a minute while I get myself organized here.
We focused on the majority of them, but as far as the Woodbine action goes, we had a Breeders' Cup win, and you're in the EP Taylor with She Feels Pretty going up to be a pretty strong favorite, and she was a little. Do you want to talk about that now, right?
I was going to tee it up. I was going to tee that one up, and hopefully you can come up with anything else for a moment.
That's fine. So as far as other Saratoga races go, the other two stakes races on the weekend were 2-year-old turf stakes. I guess with a juvenile turf sprint in the mix, and with us looking ultimately towards Breeders' Cup, you have to at least mention Bobrovsky ran very well, and I did not expect that. I did not expect him to improve as much going to turf. It's been a banner year for Dale Romans, and he continued it. So this was a horse that ended up rating very kindly, not the easiest thing to do. Ran down Monster very easily. I think the disappointing thing about this race was we've had Schwarzenegger and Sandel's Song both touted to us for quite some time. We've not had a chance for them to run. So that's what I would say about other races.
We've got the In the Money Horse Player Tour coming back on Friday. $20 to play. 2 ways to win a $10,000 BCBCC traditional feeder into the Saturday qualifier. But also, if you finish in the top 4 any week, you participate in our playoffs, which are coming up fast. Great opportunity. The House Cut supports equine aftercare, and great chance for you to get that added BCBCC at no cost to you. when we're talking Breeders' Cup and looking back to last weekend, we got to talk about the win and you're in action from Woodbine in the EP Taylor Stakes. She Feels Pretty gets the job done in here. What did we learn from this performance, Nick?
You know, what we've learned earlier in the year, Pete, is that Cherie DeVos seemed pretty set on campaigning She Feels Pretty with an eye on the filly and mare turf. And I think the problem that you run into with middle distance older females is that your only options are going to be at 1 3/8 and a mile when the Breeders' Cup is held at a place like Del Mar. Cherie's decision to keep her long has definitely led to multiple grade 1 wins now. One in New York now, one in the EP Taylor. But what I think we saw pretty clearly is a horse that probably doesn't want to go much beyond 1.25 miles. And I think if you asked anybody from Godolphin or Charlie Appleby himself, he would probably tell you that Diamond Rain is not among the best fillies he could potentially send over for this race. Now, in fairness, she was on the improve. She had won a couple of races in a row. Her biggest turf triumph was in a $95,000 race at Haydock. So, I mean, we're talking like not even listed, lower level type stuff. Appleby's horses have run extremely well at Woodbine in the past. Diamond Rain took She Feels Pretty right to the wire, and She Feels Pretty coming off the turn on that big EP Taylor turf course looked like she was going to win for fun. So I think distance-wise, she's really topped out at 1.25 miles. The 1 3/8 to me looks like something that she's not going to be able to handle. Hot take, I think she should be shortened up to 1 mile if she's ultimately going to go to the Breeders' Cup. I do think based on what we've seen in the mile division with horses like Deterministic winning the 4-star Dave, I think the mile division among the American horses is not that strong. And let's remember, not that long ago, Cherie DeVos won this race a year ago in winning the Breeders' Cup mile with a horse that looked like he probably couldn't ever get to Breeders' Cup type form during Saratoga. So I'd shorten her back up. Want to see her in the First Lady.
Great stuff. Very good. Appreciate that take on She Feels Pretty. That was going to be my next question, is where should they go if not there? And that mile, being in those hands where you certainly have somebody who knows what it takes to win a race like that, I think that makes sense as a target. Did we learn anything else in these Woodbine races that we can carry forward for us? Do we think there's an opportunity? I mean, you look back at Diamond Rain and this trip. Now, granted, they probably went slow. It's a weird thing. Usually, when they go a slow pace, the horse that doesn't break, you'd want to give extra credit to, but it seemed like Buick did such a good job getting her into the race without having to use her too much. I didn't necessarily want to mark up Diamond Rain that much. It just looked like, I'd rate those horses about the same coming out of this. What about you between those top two?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't have any argument with it. I think that's probably about on point. Appleby's runs such a small number of horses over here. It seems like we're getting a little bit more of the select version of what he wants to run here based on the way El Cordobas and Nation's Pride ran and now Diamond Rain. And quite honestly, Pete, I think we'd all admit at this point that our turf racing over here is a lot more fun when he's involved. So he burned a ton of money in 2024, and now we haven't had any of him. And it's like, we kind of could use those horses over here again, not only for field size, but because they're generally a good fit. So
I'm hoping we'll see more. It feels like, I think there were some real logistical issues for everybody in getting horses over here. And it seems like, having seen more shippers this summer, that maybe those floodgates will be ready to open for the Breeders' Cup. For a minute there, I was getting worried about that.
No, me too. Yeah, I was getting very concerned, but I know he already mentioned Rebels Romance to the Canadian International, which I think would obviously be a stepping stone to a third, try it for a third Breeders' Cup turf win. I think we talked about this last week. He'd be the first 3-time Breeders' Cup turf winner. He'd definitely be the first to do it in 4 years. So it would be pretty incredible, but he's developed into a really, really nice horse.
It's been fun. Appleby's great to have on the scene. That was a terrific run. Did everything but win, as the old cliche goes. All right, Nick, I think we got some guests in the waiting room. If you're on the audio side here, we've got a lot more show coming. If you're on the video side, let us know what you thought about She Feels Pretty. Is Nick right? Should she be cut back to the mile? Should they keep her going long? Also, let us know what you think about these 3-year-old fillies on the dirt side. Is Nitrogen a serious contender for the distaff at this point? It's kind of hard to say she isn't, but then again, we're going to learn so much more. I guess we do have 30 seconds. Did you take an early look at this Travers? Is there any way, can we make the wise guy case for magnitude to wire Sovereignty, or is this just going to be another coronation, as it were?
100%, you can make a wise guy case for Magnitude. Absolutely. If I were to ask you, Pete, who's the best speed horse Sovereignty's ever run down? You'd probably say Journalism. He's not a speed horse.
Exactly. Like I was going to say Journalism, and that was
Right.
my exact thought process.
And then the reason why I draw that comparison is because Magnitude has the ability in this race to do some of what we were already talking about in this show. And if he gets Sovereignty to run faster early than he's comfortable with doing so, he's not going to have that same kick. I want to be respectful of Sovereignty because I think he's outstanding, and I love that we're going to get to see him in this Travers. He's massively overrated at this point because everybody loves Bill Mott, and they love that Bill Mott made the unpopular decision. He's done right by his horse, so on and so forth. Take nothing away from Bill Mott whatsoever. But this is a horse that is being compared to some all-time greats that probably he doesn't belong really getting compared to them yet. Yeah, is what I say. He has the ability to get there, but winning 5-horse Jim Dandies over Baeza and finding a way to beat Journalism twice doesn't make you an all-time great. So he's a horse that we need to be a little careful about who he is exactly. He beats Magnitude on the square on Saturday. I know I'll probably have to change my tune. I am a Breeders' Cup Classic top 10 voter, and I will tell everybody at this point in the first 2 rankings, I have ranked him second. So it's not as if I am disrespectful. I can still think he's very good while thinking he's overrated. But I picked Sierra Leone first. But I want to see him do it against a quality speed horse. The best speed horse he's faced in his last 4 starts was Rodriguez. The best horse with tactical speed was Tappan Street, and he beat him.
Right. I mean, I could even argue
fields are very dangerous when it comes to having one confirmed speed horse. It can get very, very dangerous for an off-the-pace horse.
I'll be cynical ahead of time and say even if he does the business in the Travers, before I start to take the affirmed comparisons seriously, I'm going to probably want him to beat his elders in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, I think so.
To go full.
And the thing is, right, and I'll say I won't move him to first in my Breeders' Cup rankings until if Sierra Leone loses a race like the Jockey Club Gold Cup, and whether he has his friend with him or not to help the pace situation, we'll see what happens over the next 2 weeks. I'll tell you this much, and I mean I know we talked about Breeders' Cup a little bit, but just the first 5 that I have on my list, the whole 10 in general, if they get into the gate, I mean that's going to be outstanding. That is just potential to be incredibly good. I have Mindframe 3rd, Journalism 4th, and Nisos 5th, and those horses all being in the same gate to me would just be incredible.
That would be amazing. What are we hearing? What are we hearing about our Japanese friend, Forever Young? He's in the betting. Is he going to turn up?
I have him on my list. I think the last I heard was that they were going to prep in October and bring him back over. So I hope that's the case.
But wouldn't that add a special amount of flavor to this one as well? All right, Nick, I've kept you over time, but we appreciate your insights as always. Read Nick over at inthemoneypodcast.com if you want even more. And this is a great time to subscribe to In the Money Plus because we're going to have our whole Breeders' Cup package. We talk about a ton of stuff for free. So it's not like you have to do this, but it's a good thing to do to get all the info. And it just supports all the content we give you for free over here. Other easy things to do include subscribing to the In the Money Media YouTube channel and also our free newsletter. That helps us out too, and it helps you keep track of all this content. InTheMoneyPodcast.com/email. We will be back very soon.